And so, 200 years before Game of Thrones, we return to Westeros in House of the Dragon. So the premise for this series is where we start in episode 1, we're at the apex, the top of the Targaryens dynasty and their power. We're five kings in from the Targaryens' rule. And they're ruling everywhere except for Dorne. That hasn't happened yet. So where the story really centers away from how Targaryens rule themselves and rule Westeros is it's male to male. And in this case, King Viserys, his heir is his oldest daughter, Princess Rhaenyra, because he only had one surviving daughter from his beloved wife, which was Queen Aemma. Now, basically the first episode is about him naming his heir, and he's going to be shocking the entire court by picking his daughter, even though by male-to-male standards it would go to his younger brother, Prince Daemon. So that's basically the premise going forward, with King Viserys first of his name. Now we know of another Viserys, but the less we talk about that, the better. He is the 5th king. The Targaryens are rooted in everything. Unlike in Game of Thrones, where we're talking about the Targaryens being so far removed, they're basically urchins on a different continent. In this case, we're at the pinnacle or the golden age of the Targaryen dynasty. Because previous to King Viserys, his grandfather, called King Jaehaerys I, was a long-living king whose rule lasted 50 years. Now, the problem with that is that both his sons, they both died before him. And it literally boiled down to the 2 heirs that were potential picks was the firstborn son's only daughter, or Prince Viserys, who was the eldest son of the second son. Confusing, I know. So even though it's only been male kings so far, they did actually convene a council, the Great Council, and they all met, all these lords, at Harrenhal. And Viserys won by a huge margin. So he became the heir. He became King Viserys first of his name, but it isolated the other heir, which was Princess Rhaenys. Our next character is Prince Daemon Targaryen. Now, he's the younger brother of King Viserys, and although he is the next male heir, presumptively because King Viserys doesn't have any male children, a lot of the lords don't actually want Prince Daemon to be the heir because he's actually seen as unpredictable, volatile. You know, he's that kind of guy. Now, what he is famed for, he is supposed to be a great warrior. He's a dragon rider. He also wields Dark Sister. Now, that was the Valyrian sword originally wielded by Visenya, Aegon's sister wife. Now, being the presumptive heir that he thinks he is, and you can see that from this picture, he has this look on, yes, I'm the heir, look at me, you should be adorning me because I'm going to be your future king. But it's obviously not in the cards for him. Now, this is where I'm going to see that, one head of the dragon is going to be him, and it's going to cause animus with his brother. Because even though by genitals he should be the heir, everyone, including the Hand of the King, who we'll talk about later, they don't think he would be a good fit. And remember what they said about Targaryens. Every time one is born, the gods flip a coin, and they could either be, level-headed like Jaehaerys, or they could be absolute raging monsters. That brings us to Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, the king's firstborn child. She is of pure Valyrian blood, and she is a dragon rider. Many would say that Rhaenyra was born with everything, but she was not born a man. You see, she was the only child of King Viserys and his wife, Queen Aemma Arryn. Now, not to go too far in the story, I think at the time that the series starts, his wife has already died, and there's going to be no more children. So he has his only child, Princess Rhaenyra. Now, you actually see a younger version of her, I assume in flashbacks, unless they start young and then transfer to this current Rhaenyra that you see on screen. And from what I can tell, although Prince Daemon is presumptive heir because, you know, he has a penis, they didn't outrightly say that she wasn't the heir. Although from what I can tell, she is around power. She's not made to sit at the side doing needlework. I think I actually saw some pictures of her being a cupbearer in her younger years. So I think her father always keeps her within the power, sort of learning, but not actually naming her the heir, which is probably safer because we know how cutthroat Westeros could be. If he named her the heir when she was too young, she could have been killed by rivals, maybe even her uncle. And now we come to Sir Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King to Viserys the First. He's the younger brother of Lord Hobart Hightower and the father of Alicent Hightower. He's actually been the Hand of the King to King Jaehaerys before he was the current King Viserys Hand of the King. And from what I can tell, he actually helped basically run Westeros for a couple of years before King Jaehaerys' health just completely failed on him. And point of note that he is not a fan of Prince Daemon because he doesn't think he's the right fit. Now, I don't know if he's just keeping that to himself and speaking to other confidants, or if he's actually coming out and saying that to Prince Daemon. I don't think so. But from what I can tell with most Hands of the Kings, you have to be knowledgeable, you have to know where to pick your battles, and you have to know not just what to say, but sometimes what not to say. So watch this space. He is in a place of power and he does have influence, but whether or not he's going to help the situation, we will find out. And then we come to his daughter, Alicent Hightower. As daughter of Hand of the King, she's grew up in the king's inner circle, and it's said that she's the most comely woman in the Seven Kingdoms, and she was raised in the Red Keep, close to the king, and she possesses both a courtly grace and a keen political acumen. And from what I can tell, both Alicent Hightower and Princess Rhaenyra, they seem about the same age, and I have a funny feeling that they're going to be friends, and that they're got to be strong women surrounded by people, males, who have all the power. Doesn't mean she doesn't have power. Obviously, being described as one of the most comely women, we can all guess what that's supposed to be about. That is her power, as you can see it. If we go into some mini backstory, she actually was a good companion for the previous king, King Jaehaerys, because in his latter years he was very ill and bedridden. And she actually became his companion by fetching him meals, helping him wash and dress. She read to him. And I think that gives her a lot of currency in the Targaryen family. And I think that will come to play in the episodes and stories to come. And now we come to the queen who never was, Princess Rhaenys Targaryen. She even said it herself, men would sooner put the realm to the torch than see a woman ascend the Iron Throne. And she's been proved right, because she's been passed over as queen, even though rightfully, as the daughter of the oldest son, it should have went to her. You know, the rules of primogeniture. But because it was so, the idea was so controversial, they were like, oh, I can't do this. So King Jaehaerys ended up coming up with that solution of having the Lords of Westeros hold a vote. And in the end, like I said earlier, they chose Viserys with a wide margin, even though in another way she's been looked over twice, because even her son should have came before Viserys, because she's married to Corlys Velaryon and she has 2 children, Laena Velaryon and Rhaenyra Velaryon. So even if she's passed over as queen, you would think her son would be seen as the next heir, because it's a direct link down. But obviously it didn't go that way, and when Jaehaerys died, Viserys ascended the throne. And that caused the big rift between Targaryens. And the thing about Rhaenys is she's married to one of the richest people in the whole of Westeros. Corlys is Admiral of the Fleet, and having been passed over twice for the crown, Rhaenys and the Velaryons are actually estranged from Viserys and his court, I assume at the start of the series. And then we come to Lord Corlys Velaryon, also known as the Sea Snake. He's the head of House Velaryon and husband of Princess Rhaenys Targaryen. He's also the Lord of Tides and has a position on the small council as Lord Admiral and Master of Ships and the head of the Royal Fleet. But what's even more impressive is he's actually richer than the Lannisters and the Hightowers and all those people, because he's been, and his family have been, they're involved in trade. They actually came years before the Targaryens, and like the Targaryens, they actually share with the silver hair. And I love that George R.R. Martin actually said that is how he imagined this family, that they're black descent but they still have Valyrian silver hair. As head of House Velaryon, he rules the island of Driftmark, which is one of the larger islands in Blackwater Bay. And as the Sea Snake, the most famed nautical adventurer in the history of Westeros, Lord Corlys built his house into a powerful seat. The fact that he is actually part of the small council and involved with King Viserys and his rule, I guess because him and his family are the best and the most famed for their ships and how they use their ships, because where the Targaryens had dragons, which was powerful and, brought down nations and created one, they've been steady in their accumulation of wealth. So I suppose even through a Targaryen-Valyrian rift, people weren't gonna stop doing business. So he is involved to that extent. But as far as I can tell, obviously he's going to be plumbing for his wife, that she's been basically done wrong, and that's the reason why their family is not immediately into the king's circle. But we'll see if that changes. So that's 7 of the main characters in House of the Dragon, and I think it's a very interesting dynamic between the split between the Targaryens, so even they've branched off, and then the people in the middle, like Otto Hightower and Alicent Hightower. And obviously, as time goes on, there'll be more characters that you could look into, and I probably will. But at the minute, I'm just super excited to see how the story develops. And I'm particularly excited about the dragons, because like I said, with the info about the show and the premise, is that they said that there could be as many as 15, I've even heard 17 dragons. And I'd love to actually do videos covering these main characters and who's a dragon rider, particularly when you look at, and a little sort of thing that really excites me, was Balerion the Black Dread, one of the most powerful and famous ever dragons that Aegon himself rode. He was actually King Viserys' dragon for a few years, and up until Balerion died, he died of old age. He was like 200 years old. So I'd be really interested to maybe see him in a flashback and see the other dragons and their riders and how the dynamics are, because we're going to be seeing a lot of dragons in King's Landing, in the dragon pit, and even seeing the skull of Balerion the Black Dread, because if you remember, they kept the skulls. They were actually pride of place in the throne room until Robert's Rebellion, and he took them and got rid of them and smashed some. So it's going to be really excited. I'm really looking forward to it, and I know it's been a while since I made a video, 3 years. You know, when you go north of the wall, the wildling that I am, you kind of get stuck doing other things. But I'm very happy to come back, especially for House of the Dragon. So let's just roll on now, and I look forward to seeing how this story goes. Like I said, I'm really excited. Thank you very much for watching the video, and see you in the next one.